Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The ring world shimmered in the soft light of its central star, an ancient construct orbiting the barren planet below. Humanity had colonized the surface, erecting sleek buildings and mining stations, their metallic surfaces glittering under the eternal daylight. Above them, suspended like a crown around the planet, was the ring, the key to humanity's future. Rich with untapped energy, its resources promised to fuel their expansion into the stars. But few understood the dangers that lurked within its shimmering structure. Dr. Elena Royce stood at the observation deck of the Colony San Main Research Facility, her fingers lightly tapping the transparent wall. She gazed out at the distant ring, unease tightening her chest. For weeks, she had observed subtle anomalies in the ring, ecosystem, tiny disruptions in the energy flows, shifts in the magnetic field. The data didn't lie, something was changing. Elena. She turned to see Captain Jonas Mercer, the leader of the colony's set defense forces, standing in the doorway. His tall, muscular frame filled the space, but his stern face softened slightly when he looked at her. "You're still here," he said, walking over to join her by the window. "You've been working nonstop. Any new finding?" Elena sighed, brushing a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "I've been running simulations all night. The ring's energy patterns are fluctuating more than ever. It sounds as if something inside it is waking up." Jonas frowned. "Waking up? You were talking about the ecosystem, right?" "I wish I was, but it's more than that." She pointed to a cluster of readings on her tablet. "The ecosystem is collapsing, in some areas plants dying, animals behaving erratically. But the real concern is the energy grid. It's fluctuating at a level we've never seen before. Something deeper is happening." Jonas studied the data, his military instincts kicking in. "Have you alerted the Colony Council?" "They don't see the urgency," Elena replied, her frustration evident. "They're too focused on resource extraction. Corporate wants results, and they don't care about long-term effect." Jonas clenched his jaw. He knew the pressures from corporate interests all too well. "I'll talk to them, but if you rewrite and something's waking up, we need to prepare." Elena nodded, grateful for his support. As Jonas left the room, her gaze drifted back to the ring, its mysterious beauty now tinged with foreboding. Lena Trask wiped the sweat from her brow as she tightened the last bolt on the mining rig stabilizer. The underground tunnels were hot and claustrophobic, the air thick with the hum of machinery. She'd spent the last few weeks supervising the latest mining operations deep within the ring's core, and something about the place unnerved her. Her team had uncovered strange formations within the tunnel structures that didn't seem natural. Biomechanical almost. Lena had reported it, but the corporate overseers brushed it off, urging her to stay on schedule. Profits over anomalies, as usual. Still, curiosity gnawed at her. As the others packed up for the day, she lingered near one of the strange formations, a wall of pulsating material that seemed to breathe. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, and something inside it beckoned her to come closer. Lena approached, reaching out hesitantly. Her fingertips grazed the surface, and suddenly a low hum vibrated through the tunnel. The wall pulsed with energy, glowing faintly as a strange warmth spread through her body. What the heck? Before she could react, the ground trembled violently, and a deafening roar echoed through the tunnel. Miners shouted in alarm as the tunnel walls began to shake. Lena stumbled backward, her heart racing as the floor cracked beneath her feet. "Evacuate," she yelled, sprinting toward the exit. Her voice was drowned out by the sounds of collapsing rock and machinery screeching to a halt. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the pulsating wall, which now throbbed with an intense, almost malevolent energy. Lena barely made it to the surface before the tunnel collapsed behind her. Dust and debris filled the air as she collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath. Whatever she had touched, whatever had been slumbering within that structure, was now awake. The colony was in chaos. Reports of strange incidents flooded in from across the settlement. Animals behaving erratically, colonists experiencing vivid hallucinations, and entire sections of the ecosystem collapsing into dead zones. It was as if the ring itself had turned hostile. Elena stood in the colony's command center, surrounded by anxious scientists and military personnel. Screens displayed images of the unfolding disaster, forests withering, rivers drying up, and strange energy readings spiking across the ring. The once stable environment had been thrown into turmoil. "What's happening out there?" Jonas asked, his voice tense. He stood beside Alina, watching the chaos unfold on the screen. It sounds the ecosystem, Alina replied, her eyes glued to the data. The ring's energy is destabilizing, and it says affecting everything, plants, animals, even the colonists. Some kind of biological manipulation is at play. Biological manipulation? Jonas' frown deepened. You mean something is controlling that? I don't know, Alina admitted, but the signs point to an external force. Something ancient, something tied to the ring's energy. Before Jonas could respond, a sudden commotion erupted from the far side of the room. Several colonists were shouting, and a man at the back convulsed violently before collapsing to the floor. His body twitched unnaturally, and his eyes rolled back into his head. Get medical in here, Jonas barked, rushing over to the fallen colonist. But as the medics approached, the man's body went limp, and a chilling silence fell over the room. Alina knelt beside the man, her heart pounding. She placed her fingers on his wrist, checking for a pulse. There was none. What happened to him? One of the medics asked, her voice shaking. I am not sure, Alina whispered, her mind racing. The man's body bore no visible injuries, but his expression, his face frozen in a look of pure terror, told a different story. As she stood up, something cold brushed against her thoughts, a faint whisper at the edge of her consciousness. It was fleeting, barely perceptible, but it left a lingering sense of dread. Alina, Jonas said quietly, his voice low. What's going on? I think she swallowed her throat dry. I think we're not alone. The following days were a blur of escalating tension. The colony was on the verge of panic as more and more colonists began exhibiting strange behavior, outbursts of violence, bizarre hallucinations, and sudden deaths with no apparent cause. The defense forces were spread thin, struggling to maintain order. Jonas paced the command center, his mind racing with strategies to contain the situation. He'd have seen his fair share of crises in the military, but nothing like this. How do you fight an enemy that invades your mind? Alina, we need answers, Jonas said, stopping by her workstation. We were running out of time. I know, Alina replied, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless night. I've been studying the energy readings, trying to piece together what is happening. Whatever is controlling the colonists is linked to the ring's energy grid, is ancient, predating human colonization. So, what is it? Jonas asked, his frustration mounting. I believe that as an alien species, Alina said, her voice steady. A species that once controlled the ring world, using mind control to dominate its inhabitants. When we disrupted the ecosystem, we awoke them. Now they were trying to reclaim what they lost. Jonas stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. You were saying we were dealing with mind-controlling aliens? Exactly. Alina nodded. They were not just attacking us physically. They were infiltrating our minds, bending us to their will. And we stopped them. There might be a way, Alina said, glancing at the data on her screen. The ring's energy grid acted as a containment field, keeping the aliens dormant. If we can reverse the damage caused by the mining operations, we might be able to re-establish the containment. Jonas' jaw tightened. That's a big if. Alina, do we even know how to do that? I've been working on a plan, Alina said, pulling up a map of the ring. We'll need to shut down the key mining hubs that destabilize the energy grid, but they were deep within alien-controlled territory. Great, Jonas muttered. We'll need a team to go in and manually shut them down. Alina nodded grimly, and there's no guarantee we'll make it back. Jonas looked at her, his expression hardening with resolve. We have a choice. We either stop this, or we all fall under their control. Alina met his gaze, the weight of their task pressing down on them both. The fate of the colony and perhaps humanity itself rested on their shoulders. Lena paced restlessly in the temporary command post set up near the colony's perimeter. The air was thick with tension, and the distant hum of machinery provided an eerie backdrop to the growing sense of dread. Every corner of the colony seemed touched by the alien presence now, and the once bustling settlement felt like it was teetering on the edge of collapse. Dr. Royce and Captain Mercer had called for a final briefing. Lena knew that whatever they were planning would be dangerous, but after what she'd witnessed in the mining tunnels, she felt a deep responsibility to help stop the madness she'd unwittingly unleashed. All right, Jonas began addressing the small group gathered around a digital map of the ring. His voice was calm, but the lines of fatigue etched into his face betrayed the pressure he was under. We have 3 primary targets, mining hubs, Alpha, Beta, and Delta. These are the sites where the energy grid was compromised. Shutting them down should help reestablish the containment field around the ring. But the path to those hubs is completely controlled by the ancients. Lena stepped forward, arms crossed. So how exactly are we supposed to reach these hubs without getting turned into their puppet? Alina looked up from her tablet, her expression grave. I've developed a prototype neural dampener, basically a device that interferes with their ability to control our minds. It's signed untested, but it's the best shot we have. Lena raised an eyebrow, untested, and what happens if it fails? We become part of their hive mind, Elena answered bluntly. I could say, risk we have to take. Jonas' gaze swept over the room. This is a volunteer mission. No one here is being forced into it, but understand this is our last chance to save the colony and ourselves. A heavy silence followed his words. Each person in the room understood the gravity of the situation. They had all seen what the ancients could do, friends and colleagues transformed into mindless drones, bodies twisted by the alien influence. There was no need for further persuasion. Amina said, breaking the silence. I helped trigger this, so I'm gonna help fix it. Me too, added Corporal Stevens, one of Jonas's most trusted soldiers. You're going down, I'd rather go down fighting. One by one, the others nodded their agreement, their faces set with grim determination. The mission was suicide, but it was also their only hope. Jonas exhaled slowly, his voice steady. Try we move out at dawn, get some rest. You were going to need it. The briefing ended, and the group dispersed, preparing for what was likely their final mission. Lina lingered, glancing at the map one last time before stepping outside into the cold, dim light of the ring's artificial day. The horizon glowed faintly with the ring's energy, casting long shadows over the colony. She wondered if this would be the last time she would see it. The journey to the first hub was treacherous. Lena, Jonas, Elena, and the small team of soldiers moved cautiously through the dense forests that surrounded the colony. Set outer limit. The once vibrant and alien flora now appeared twisted and decayed, a reflection of the ring's deteriorating ecosystem. Strange whispers floated through the air, tugging at the edges of their minds, but Elena's neural dampeners seemed to be holding for the moment. They traveled in silence, the weight of their mission pressing down on them like a physical force. Every step felt like it carried them deeper into the jaws of the enemy. Lena kept her eyes forward, gripping her pulse rifle tightly. Her fingers itched to pull the trigger, but no enemy had yet shown itself. It wasn't until they reached the first hub that the full extent of the alien presence revealed itself. The mining station had been completely overtaken by the ancient. Pulsating organic growths spread across the facility, sad metal surfaces creeping over walls and machinery like a living infection. The air was thick with a strange humming vibration that made Lena's skin crawl. The ground itself seemed to pulse in time with the ring's energy as if the planet were breathing. Stay close, Jonas whispered, signaling for the team to spread out and secure the area. We want dates down and then we move on. Lena followed Alina to the main console where they would need to initiate the shutdown sequence. As they approached, the alien growths twitched, as if sensing their presence. The neural dampeners hummed louder, struggling to block out the increasing pressure on their mind. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the facility, and from the shadows emerged several colonists, no longer themselves, their eyes blank and faces twisted into grotesque masks of rage. They moved with jerky, unnatural movements, their bodies contorted by the alien influence. Open fire, Jonas barked, raising his rifle. The sound of gunfire ripped through the air as the team unleashed a hail of bullets at the advancing figure. But the colonists, now puppets of the ancients, did not retreat. They charged forward with terrifying speed, their limbs flailing as they closed the distance. Lena fired her rifle, her pulse pounding in her ears. She tried not to think about the fact that these were once people, her people. There was no saving them now. Alina worked furiously at the console, her fingers flying across the controls. We're almost there. She shouted over the din of battle. Make it fast? Jonas grunted, taking down another controlled colonist. We're running out of time. Lena caught a glimpse of movement to her right, a colonist. A woman she recognized. sprinting toward her with bloodshot eyes and a wild, inhuman scream. She hesitated for only a second before pulling the trigger. The woman crumpled to the ground, and Lena's stomach twisted. There was no room for hesitation out here. Got it. Elena cried, and with a final keystroke, the facility's lights flickered, then went dark. The alien growth shuddered violently, then began to wither, retreating from the walls like a dying organism. We've got 2 more to go, Jonas shouted, signaling the team to regroup. They didn't stop to rest. Time was running out. The second hub was even more dangerous than the first. By now, the ancients were fully aware of their efforts to restore the containment field, and their control over the colonists had intensified. The team encountered larger groups of infected colonists and strange alien creatures that seemed to have manifested from the ring SAS energy itself, creatures with long sinuous limbs and glowing eyes that stalked them through the dense forest. Lena moved in a daze, her muscles burning from exhaustion, but her mind sharp with adrenaline. She couldn't stop thinking about the miners, those who'd been the first to be controlled, and the role she had played in triggering this nightmare. But there was no time for self-recrimination. Survival was all that mattered now. By the time they reached the third and final hub, they were down 2 men. The losses weighed heavily on the group, but there was no turning back. The containment field had to be reactivated, or everything they fought for would be lost. The final hub was located deep within a canyon, the entrance guarded by a massive alien structure that pulsed with energy. This was the heart of the ring, the core of the ancients' power. Lena's breath hitched as she gazed at the towering structure, its biomechanical walls writhing like a living creature. This is it, Jonas said, his voice low crepe. Once we shut this down, the containment should reactivate. Should nerves ache? Her nerves frayed. Elena shot her a grim look. I should have only shot. They moved into the structure cautiously, the air thick with tension. Every corner seemed to watch them, every shadow a potential threat. The deeper they ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, until it felt as if the walls were closing in on them. At the heart of the structure, they found the central control node, a massive glowing orb of energy that pulsed in time with the ring as fluctuation. Alien tendrils writhed around it, feeding off the energy, like parasites. We'll need to overload the core, Elena said, approaching the console. It should trigger a cascade that will reset the entire system. As she began working on the console, the room trembled and the whispers in their minds grew louder, more insistent. Lena pressed a hand to her temple, fighting against the growing pressure. They know what we're redoing, Jonas muttered, scanning the room. Ear, stay sharp. Suddenly, the walls of the structure rippled and the floor beneath them shifted. Alien figures began to emerge from the shadows, twisted forms of both colonists and creatures alike, their eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. Lena raised her rifle, her heart racing. Hurry, Wi-Fi got company. The final battle erupted in a blur of gunfire and chaos. Lena fought with everything she had, her body moving on instinct as she dodged the attacks of the alien-controlled being. Jonas was a force of nature beside her, his rifle spitting fire as he mowed down the advancing horde. But it was clear that they were outnumbered and the enemy was closing in fast. Elena, now would be a good time, Jonas shouted, firing off a burst of rounds. I'm almost there, Elena called back, her fingers flying over the control. Lena could feel the walls pressing in on them, the whispers clawing at the edges of her mind. Just when she thought they couldn't hold out any longer, Elena shouted triumphantly, Stanley, got it. The entire structure shuddered and the glowing orb at its center flared to life, sending out a pulse of energy that rippled through the ring world. The alien figures around them froze, their control severed as the containment field reactivated. Lena collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath as the oppressive presence in her mind faded. Around her, the alien-controlled colonists felt their bodies limp and lifeless. It was over. The days that followed were a blur of recovery and rebuilding. The colony had been ravaged by the conflict, but the reactivation of the containment field had stabilized the ring's ecosystem. The ancients had been sealed away once more, their power contained for now. Lena stood at the edge of the colony, staring up at the ring as it shimmered in the sky above. The cost of their survival weighed heavily on her, and the faces of those they had lost haunted her thought. But they had done it. They had saved the colony, even if the price had been steep. Jonas approached, his expression somber. "We did it," he said quietly. "Yeah," Lena replied, her voice hollow. "We did." Alina joined them, her face lined with exhaustion but filled with quiet determination. "The ancients are sealed away, but this isn't over. We need to ensure that what happened here never happens again." Lena nodded, her gaze fixed on the ring. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the colony, Lena knew that their fight was far from over. The ancients had been defeated, but the memory of their control, their whispers would linger in her mind for as long as she lived. But for now, the ring was silent, and humanity had won a fragile, hard-fought victory.